Tonight, more troubling revelations surface in the growing church sex abuse scandal.
A disproportionate number of gay men.
In modern times, sex scandals involving priests and children.
Every day there are more headlines about the Catholic hierarchy's dealing with the pedophilia and sexual abuse crisis in Boston and around the country. The frenzy began when Father John Gagan was sentenced to 10 years on sexual abuse charges. He was accused of molesting more than 130 children over 30 years.
Guilty offenses charged with indecent assault and battery on a child under 14 years of age.
Gagan's superiors, including Bernard Cardinal Law, apparently knew about Gagan's sexual abuse, but decided to transfer him to other parishes rather than turning him over to authorities. It turned out to be just the tip of the iceberg. Since Gagan's sentencing, hundreds of other victims have stepped forward with allegations concerning priests around the country.
Prosecutors said Bishop Thomas O'Brien fought them for months over the release of church documents that they were seeking in their investigation of abusive priests. 2 weeks ago, O'Brien relented, signing an agreement in which he admitted keeping known pedophile priests in positions with access to children. In exchange, O'Brien was given immunity from prosecution. The dispute between Keating and Cardinal Mahoney was sparked by the Cardinal's refusal to provide the National Review Board with data on the number of priests accused of molesting children and the number of victims.
The Hartford Courant obtained sealed court documents that accused Egan of reassigning priests after sexual abuse allegations were made and failing to report those alleged incidents to authorities.
But now, Walsh is the subject of an investigation that could lead to the first indictment of a U.S. Catholic bishop for failing to report an abusive priest. Walsh says that after the priest admitted molesting 3 boys, he did not notify authorities immediately.
The mission is shocking, but consider this raw data. A survey commissioned by the U.S. Catholic Church found more than 10,000 allegations of sexual abuse involving more than 4,300 priests and deacons. 81% of the alleged victims were male, 19% were female. The study covered the years between 1950 and 2002.
Reports that 7 Catholic priests formerly accused of child molestation have been living in an Oakland seminary.
So many people. We talk about it as if it's a crisis that has come and gone, but it's part of the Catholic culture. It's part of the culture of the priesthood.
They're purportedly the most moral institution in the world, but they're evil. They're nothing but evil.
A former church leader is accused of sexually abusing several children, members of his own congregation.
Now, as he faces serious felony charges, police are wondering if there are even more victims. ABC4's Susan Wood shows us how police say a man in a position of trust may have been abusing it in the worst way. Susan?
Barb, not only was he the bishop in a small community north of Ogden, he ran a small...
Over the past few years, the Catholic Church has had more than its share of child abuse cases. Now it's the Church of England in trouble. Former choirmaster in Hampshire, Peter Halliday, has pleaded guilty to sexually abusing choir boys in the late 1980s, and he'll be sentenced today at Winchester Crown Court. Bad enough, but what's really damaging to the church is that it knew what was going on and did not call in the police. Halliday was allowed to leave quietly on condition that he had no more contact with young children. Well, he did. One of those he abused, now a young man, of course, talked to our reporter Sancha Berg. He was 10 when it happened. His words are read by an actor.
It was both when I was alone with him and when there were others there. It happened in his house when I was alone with him, having individual tuition, but it also happened on trips. It even happened when I was in dormitories with other boys. I was horrified. When your first sexual experience is a 40-year-old man forcing himself on you, it's pretty horrific.
Well, he thought, like the other victims, that he'd escaped the...
News that the Catholic Church in Los Angeles will pay $660 million to victims of clergy sex abuse is both surprising and sobering. It's the church's largest payout yet in a national scandal that has shaken the biggest religion in this country. More than a story of faith, this has been a story of betrayal. It's also a story of shame and fear, power and secrecy. Some of the cases go back 70 years, decades during which some in the church hierarchy knew of charges against priests and did nothing. It may take a long time for the faithful to recover from this scandal. The wounds go deep. The 508 victims named in this settlement will receive about $1.3 million each. But as one woman said, "I'd give back the money if I could have my childhood back." Let's hope and pray that this will lead to steps that protect the church's children, not the church itself, and bring hope and healing to those who need it. That's a page from my notebook. I'm Katie Couric.
A father of 4 and owner of a corporate communications firm, Serrano says he was molested by a priest in New Jersey from 1974 to 1981, from the age of 9 to 16. Serrano says he was conditioned by the priest for about a year before the abuse began.
You know, to me, he was the church. I mean, he was a link to God as I was raised. He introduced French kissing and pornography, alcohol. He methodically built up the stages of molestation over time to include petting and fondling, forced masturbation and oral rape and sodomy.
Serrano says the priest told him to keep quiet. The victim finally came forward in the early 80s. Another victim who now heads a regional victim survivor network. According to Saviano, Father David Holly, who is now serving more than a 200-year sentence for molesting children, began molesting Saviano and his friends in 1964. Saviano was 11 years old.
He used us for his own sexual gratification. We were coerced into performing masturbation on him, oral sex on him. And I can remember, after all these years, I remember several instances having sex with him within the church, in the sacristy, in the church basement, in the rectory.